wrestling fans, and welcome back to NBC's 10 Count. I'm Steve Fall, but on today's edition, I am talking to Mr. Smashing Pumpkins himself, the owner of NWA. It's Billy Corgan. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm in Cleveland, which is like, it's the old classic tour joke. Hello, Cleveland. I'm actually in Cleveland. We're playing a concert tonight, so happy to talk wrestling.
Of course. That reminds, when you bring up Cleveland, I don't know why it brings me back to like the old Drew Carey show, because he'd always end it with like Ohio, Ohio. That was the entrance of the show. But
Sorry.
anyways,
never watched. Sorry, buddy.
It's quite all right. I don't think a lot of people did either. Just kidding. But let's talk about NWA, because so much is happening right now, and you have a huge pay-per-view coming up. But I do want to talk about something else first. There seems to be a big problem with wrestling media scrums. The AEW had one where CM Punk went off and went crazy, but yet it seems that he's not going to be involved with AEW anymore. If he's a free person on the market, would you be interested in bringing in CM Punk to the NWA?
I know him personally, and I haven't talked wrestling with him for years, so I would be hard pressed to imagine he'd want to come to the NWA given his other opportunities. Certainly there are other companies that are bigger and can offer him a bigger payday. I'd be surprised if he leaves AEW. I've heard those rumors too, but I've imagined that it would be worked out. So until it's official, I'm just assume that he's going to stay and they're going to figure it out, because I think he's a benefit and a bonus to them. And I think, the same in reverse. I think they've done a good thing of bringing him back to professional wrestling where he belongs, because he's such an immensely talented guy. So, look, it's wrestling, a lot of rumors, a lot of talk. For all we know, it's just part of a bigger negotiation going on behind the scenes that he's going to leave and he's still going to stay. It's wrestling. So why wouldn't we think it's an angle on some other level? So I don't know. I tend to look at those things sideways. Plus, I also don't want to be in the business of trying to openly recruit people who work for other companies. I don't like when people do it to me. I don't want to, I could name names, but I just think when people are under contract, that should be respected as best as possible. So
does that happen a lot to you in the NWA, where talent is being recruited even though they're working with you?
Oh yeah. Some companies are super respectful about it, to the extent that they'll reach out and find out that somebody's under contract, and they'll be like, cool, I'll talk to you on, and they'll pick the legal date. Other people would be like, oh, okay, well, can you wiggle out of that? Or, wink, wink. It'd be a shame if you got out of your contract somehow, because we would certainly like to hire you. So, look, it happens. It happens in professional sports, meaning, NBA, MLB, all that stuff. It happens. People get accused of that stuff all the time. I just think professional wrestling works better when everybody kind of respects the ley lines. I think we've seen here in recent times that people working together has been a benefit to fans and also the talent. So I think the more transparency along those lines, both publicly and also privately, where people respect each other's contractual status and talent that are under contract, I just think it's better for business.
Agreed, because I would listen to Conrad Thompson and Bruce Pritchard's podcast, and Bruce would be like, you get a third party, and that third party goes to the talent you want from another company, and you're like, oh, hey, so when's your contract up? Because technically that third party isn't working for either side. It's the legal way to do this without actually doing it, which is very interesting. But
yeah, there's a big difference between, say, somebody poking around on a contract status and respecting that once they find it out, versus a talent becoming aware that if for some, a reason heretofore unknown, they suddenly weren't under contract, they would get a better job with another company. So basically, the other company is incentivizing that talent to become problematic, or let it be known that they'd like to go elsewhere, as opposed to respecting that you have a signed contract with a duration date.
Yeah,
in essence, the talent isn't as transparent about their motivations, but somehow you're supposed to be transparent about yours. My whole thing has always been, if a talent wants out, I would rather they come and say, look, I want to get out. Here's why. Is there something we can do, or can we work something out so everybody feels good about that? And those situations have always tended to resolve very positively, both for the NWA and for the talent. So I try to be more transparent about those things. But look, it's a business like anything else. Everybody's very competitive, whether they pretend to be or not.
Right. A hand, one hand is shaking your hand, the other hand has the knife ready to stab you in the back.
like a good Vince Russo angle, right?
You gotta do, man. Though, let's talk about that. I just want to talk about that media scrum for like one more second because I don't want to piss off AEW. If you were sitting there next to one of your talents and they started going off the way CM Punk did, now let's pretend this is not a storyline. Let's pretend this is 100% real and he's saying these things and he's going off. How do you shut that down as an owner sitting there? Do you just suddenly make a scene and be like, no more, microphone off? Like, how do you take care of that situation live on camera?
Well, see, I think that's an unfair question because we don't know a lot of things that only Tony and Punk would know.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's easy to speculate on the other side and say, oh, I would have done it different or whatever. If I was in a similar situation, to answer the spirit of the question, I think I would be calculating, is the controversy of what this person is saying going to be good for the talent and for business? Because there were aspects of what Punk said that were good for business.
Of course.
Because wrestling likes heat, or as Eric Bischoff says, controversy creates cash. So there are aspects of what Punk was saying that I think needed to be said. If there was heat and he wanted to kind of bring that to the fore, look, some of the biggest wrestling angles of all time came out of real life situations that flew open and became a thing. So again, it's an unfair question, but on the spirit of it, there are times where real life things have played into angles, and that's okay. So it's hard to say, but just to kind of put a bow on it a bit, I would caution fans to remember that, and I don't mean this as a defense of either Phil or Tony Khan. Everybody's an adult. What I am trying to say is the wrestling business is a lot more complicated than fans realize that it is. There's a lot of egos. There's a lot of money flowing. AEW has, of course, brought new energy into the wrestling business that had been kind of, in many ways, the same for 20 years-ish. So everybody's kind of dealing with on the ground, real-time things that maybe are not typical to the wrestling business. And social media has amplified that times 100. So it's easy sometimes to run it like a Zapruder film back and forth and say, this should have happened, what didn't happen.
Right.
Because I've even seen where people have been critical of Tony giving post show press conferences. Tony's gotten a ton of publicity from those post show press conferences.
Yes.
What he's done has been very good for AEW and for the business of AEW. So if you're Tony, and I'm not Tony, but if you're Tony, that's been a good thing. So to point and say, well, this one time in this one instance, and of course, and I think to be fair, I don't think anybody could have predicted what was going to be the aftermath of that situation, where obviously things got physical based on everything I've heard and read. I don't think anybody really wanted that to go there. So it's, again, I guess what I'm trying to say is the most interesting stuff at the end of the day needs to be what goes on in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
That's the business. That's the best for the boys. And yes, all these other things outside the lines of the ring are interesting. Contract status, heat, gossip. But at the end of the day, and I understand why wrestling fans are very intrigued by that. At times I get intrigued by that too. But at the end of the day, it's really not that good for business. And everybody needs to understand at the end of the day, Tony's a business guy. I'm a business guy. The McMahons, by extension now Triple H, they're business people. And at the end of the day, if you want to know how these things are going to break, they're going to break along business lines, not your fantasy, internet booking style.
Yeah.
Business dictates this business, whether anybody wants to believe it or not. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And so if you want to guess your way through it, I'd say stick with business, which is my first instinct when I read about issues between a talent and their company, is to assume that it's still probably going to end up with that talent staying with the company because that's going to be best for business.
Of course. The storyline, if CM Punk, if that's all going to be taken care of him coming back and representing like, oh, the anti AEW character on TV, creating crazy heat, crazy storyline. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I wanted your perspective on that because I know everyone was like, well, Vince McMahon never allowed this. But it's like, you don't know that. You don't know that. This is like a 1 in a million thing that happened. And that's why I was like, if you sat there.
But remember, people have criticized Vince for years for running too tight a culture.
Right. As soon as he's out, they're like, oh, what about Vince? He would have done this great job. It's like, well, before you didn't like him. Now you like him because he's not involved with the company.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that Vince did that people were critical of because he ran such a tight ship.
Yep.
And then people would say, oh, it's a culture of it's too wrapped up and talent aren't allowed to speak. And well, maybe he had a business reason for doing that. So my point is there's no perfect way to do it.
Right.
Because wrestling is such a unique combination of live sports, people putting their bodies on the line, the intensity of the moment, these big shows, and then with, of course, worked storylines, it gets very blurry in there very quickly in a way that it doesn't usually get with, let's call it the professional sports leagues, but even there it gets blurry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day, I swear I could go on any website, any Twitter, any social media and see a story about a sports athlete saying something controversial where the owner will say, like, well, how dare they do that? But there's no actual like repercussions of what they're saying. It's just more of a nice story to keep it going. But anyways, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that because I know I know everyone was very like up in the air about they love it, they hate it. It's very interesting now. But Hard Times 3, November 12th. Huge event coming up for NWA. The main event, though, was originally a one-on-one match. Then you booked it triple threat. Why? Did you feel like the one-on-one wasn't going to be marquee versus triple threat?
I'm not the biggest fan of triple threats, which is not to bury. We have 2 triple threats, actually. But there are times when it lines up where it's just perfect. And I felt this was the perfect time for a triple threat on this thing. Because there's a time where you can look at a booking sheet and you can pretty much see the way the show is going to go. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's good for business. And I think there's times when you look, so if you look at this purely from a Machiavellian booking standpoint, there are equal reasons to have Trevor Murdoch be the champion, Tyrus be the champion, or Matt Cardona be the champion. So nobody going into these main events know who's going to get booked out as the champ. So that's as simple as that. I think it's important to keep the mystery of the company always preeminent. Everybody likes to play guest booker. I used to play guest booker when I was outside the business. And I think from the inside out, you have to keep sort of a level of intrigue. And so I think this is a perfect balance at this particular moment. So for me, it was a simple decision.
It's true, because I have no idea who's going to win. Like before you go, it's a coin, 50-50. Now you're like, I don't really, it could be him, could be, I don't know. Though I'm excited for that because I think the outcome of this match, the way it could go, is going to drive people crazy, but it's also going to drive eyeballs to what's going on in NWA. We'll have to see how that goes down, though. Though last time we talked about NWA Empower, and I know that's always seems to be like a sore subject for some people where they want this event now, they want it tomorrow, they wanted it yesterday. Any update?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the interest in Empower. We continue to want to do it. We continue to have discussions with other companies about working together to create a fresh Empower event. And last time I talked about it, I created some headlines because people took umbrage with the fact. In fact, I had Maria Kanellis, so I've known Maria for many years, and I love Maria. But even Maria Kanellis calling me out, saying something about we have women and da da da. I think every company has the right to decide their level of standard. And when you create a world-class event like Empower, and it was a world-class event, well, you've set a very, very high standard of what you should expect. Of course, there are plenty of great professional women wrestlers in the world. Can they wrestle the NWA style? Can they carry a 3-hour pay-per-view? Can they move the case of women's wrestling, not just in wrestling, but in terms of international media forward? These are my concerns. So everybody has their own version of it. That's my version of it. And that's why I'm still on that. Until we can provide a world-class event with some of the best professional wrestlers in the world, of course, in this case, female on the card, then we won't do it. And all this weird howling that goes on around it seems very strange to me, because you're taking a positive and you're making a negative out of a positive. That's just so weird to me. Why would you take a positive? By the way, we put Empower as the first night of a 2-night pay-per-view on an anniversary show, and it drew. People cared. What if it didn't? People didn't care. What if it did horrible numbers? What if the matches were bad? You guys see what I'm saying? Weird. It's like, so you create a high watermark, you do something beautiful, you make a big statement, and then somehow it turns into some weird negative where somehow now I'm running from it. I'm not running from anything. I'm talking about my reasons for why we haven't done it again, and I continue to explore those opportunities. That's it. It's not more complicated than that.
Right. I think people are going to toss at you. Pro Wrestling Illustrated just showcased their PWI top 150 women in the business, and most likely they're going to toss at you, the list. I'm guessing after this interview of the list of like, well, there's 150 women, but not all of them are freelancers. Okay. They're all Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair. They're from different companies.
I'll stick my foot in it. Okay, I'll stick my foot in it. First of all, there's a lot of great professional women wrestlers in the world, just like there's a lot of great male professional wrestlers. Yep. I don't agree with a lot of their rankings right now.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
There are a lot of people on that list that are very, very good that are getting listed higher than their accomplishments. Yes. So is that a trendy thing? Is that flavor of the moment?
Yeah, I think flavor of the moment.
Okay, well, God bless.
I agree.
That's not to bury anybody.
No.
But my point is, I see people listed in high up in those rankings. I don't agree with that. Yep. And again, that's not to bury those talents. I just don't agree.
Right. And so, yes, I agree with you.
Let me put it this way. There are people on that list that could not headline a WrestleMania event, and there are people that could headline WrestleMania event that aren't high on that list. So what does that tell you?
Let's move on before we both keep stepping in mud by accident.
Listen, here's the great thing. We're debating about something that's now important.
Yes.
That 5 years ago was not important. So that's what I'm saying. Don't take a positive, and I'm not saying you, anybody listening, don't take a positive and make a negative. It's good we're debating these things.
You're right. Voices. We have to have opinions on. We can't be like, I agree, we disagree. That's it. Like having an opinion on both sides of the table and coming together and discussing it is what it's supposed to be.
No, but I'm saying it slightly differently. We're arguing in quotations.
Yes.
About how to perceive the level of quality of female professional wrestling. But that's fantastic, because that means female professional wrestling has arrived.
True.
It's arrived. It's here. It's a huge part of the business now, where 5 years ago, it wasn't as big a part of the business. So it's a good thing. But people will try to make hay out of it as if it's somehow regressive or I don't know. People make up stuff out of nothing. This is a nothing burger. I run a professional wrestling company. I have to write big checks to get some of the best professional wrestlers in the world. I have to put my money on the line to put on these events. I have to make quality rankings of talent, right? And that includes reputation, how whether their style is adaptable to other people in the locker room. There's a lot of evaluations that go into that. Mm-hmm. You know what people care about at the end of the day? Who wins the Super Bowl, right? So until anything changes, this business still runs on who headlines WrestleMania.
True.
So start there and work backwards as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. I'm friends with some of the people at PWI, but I was like, some of this is not right, and it's maybe it's a personal preference, maybe it's whatever, but it's not. If we had like, you made this much money, and we go down the line, then we'd be like, okay, this is how the list makes sense to me. It's a business. A business is supposed to make money. Though recently, you did talk about working with the WWE, because Triple H is now in charge, and it seems that the positive energy surrounding that company has completely changed from a black cloud to sunshine and rainbows. Could we see a partnership between NWA and the WWE? Could we see NWA maybe end up on Peacock underneath the WWE banner?
I have had no discussions along that end. All my comments were in reference to having had those discussions before, when Triple H was in power, and then whatever happened where he was out of power for a while.
Yes.
And now he's come back. So I know why people made hay with that. That's cool. But I have not had any recent discussions. I have channels through there, and of course I have friends in the company. And I only want the best for that company as I want the best for everybody in the business. So, if they call, I'm interested, but no, it's nothing active for sure.
Okay. And so I know people obviously love having partnerships of wrestling, and like Tony Khan bought Ring of Honor. Did he ever call you and say like, hey, I want to buy NWA from you as well?
No, never had those discussions. Ring of Honor was offered for sale to me as well.
First?
I did. I don't know. I don't know where I was in the pecking order. I got the feeling I wasn't first, and I certainly wasn't last. Excuse me. Yeah. So I don't. I did consider it, as an interesting thing to think about, like similar to what Tony did. Created a brand that runs alongside your main brand, and maybe there's a synergy there that can happen.
Yeah.
So.
I was just shocked because you think of like wrestling companies being purchased. You're like, oh my God, this was bought. Like Sinclair owned Ring of Honor. Like this is a huge company that owns another company that like got purchased, which my mind was blown that all happened. But so you talked about how you do keep up with some of the wrestling in besides NWA. Like, do you watch other programs like Raw and SmackDown and Dynamite? Like, have you noticed a difference in the product presentation of say the WWE and AEW? Because with AEW, with like the Elite and CM Punk problems, and then WWE with Vince McMahon problems and stepping away, like have you noticed a difference in both programs?
I tend to follow more the booking, like how they're booking and who they're putting over and how they run that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I certainly noticed a difference with WWE. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm less reactive to that stuff. I tend to think longer arcs.
Mm-hmm.
I think the true result of Triple H taking power, we won't really know the result of that for a few years, I think. I think people are paying a lot of attention right now, but I think he's just kind of putting in place what he's going to do. That's my sense of it. So I tend to I'm paying attention, but I think we'll know in a year or two, like where he's really going with the company.
Right, because I think right now we're in the honeymoon stage of the like, oh, it's so beautiful, everything's great. We'll be married for 5 years and see what happens, versus being married for the first 3 months and being like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever enjoyed in my life.
Well, that's wrestling and wrestling fans. They kind of do this weird, like everything is bad and then everything is great thing. And I get it. That's part of goes with the angles of the whole thing. I think at the end of the day, the bigger narrative, of course, is going to be, because it seemed from the outside that Vince McMahon's position always was to pretty much ignore competition.
Yeah.
And his way of competing was to make the WWE the best he wanted it to be in his eyes, and that he didn't really care what you did, sorta. I think Triple H is a different personality, and I think he's much more competitive in a head-to-head way. So is it a return to the Monday Night Wars? No, but I think they would be certainly more reactive in terms of the market. In essence, nobody's going to be able to claim and say, we only get to do this style of wrestling now, right, like it was for a while.
True.
Because that was sort of the argument, right? Like the cool kids are over here doing something fresh, and the old company, it's, they're stuck on some other decade. I think that stuff's ended.
I 100% agree with you on that. 2 more questions, though. When is Boston going to get an NWA pay-per-view? I'm sitting over here waiting. Huh? I'm angry, Billy. I wrote it.
I can hear the tone. I hear the tone in your voice.
I wrote right here. Come on, Billy. Come on.
Oh, nice. Now we keep looking for ways to run the Northeast. So we're there. It's just, you don't want to hear about my business problems. Let's put it that way. It's this complicated.
Well, I imagine all business is complicated, but yeah, you're in a different scheme of dealing with musicians and bands and wrestling, and you got a lot going on your plate, obviously. One final question, though. Again, Hard Times 3, November 12th. What can fans expect when they tune into this event?
I think what I keep telling people is not to sleep on what we're doing. I feel like we're kind of in that ECW mid-90s position where we're actually building something that has a lot of momentum, but the general business doesn't understand that something's happening on the ground because they're focused on what's happening elsewhere. And so that's what I keep telling people. Don't sleep on us, because they're going to wake up one day and be very surprised that we're very competitive. Everything I'm doing is to rebuild the culture of the NWA from the ground up. It's not always as flashy as I would like it to be, or splashy as I would like it to be. But I think once we kind of hit our stride, and we're just about there now. And again, I think when you look at the physicality of the NWA as opposed to other wrestling companies, I think that's really going to be the difference maker. We're pretty much the most physical company out there. And I think at the end of the day, when you're trying to attract new fans, mainstream fans, lapsed fans, and fans who at some point burn out on too much no selling, to use the term in the business, I think they're going to come back around the NWA and realize there's a solidity there that's timeless. And so that's what we're going on. And it's starting to really click now. I think this last year it's really turned the corner where it's starting to look like the company that I hoped I was buying, and now I built it. So, whether you pop in now or next time, when you do, you're going to be surprised at the level of quality that goes on. And that goes back to the whole argument about the Empower show. It's very trendy to say, I'm doing something. It's another thing to actually pull it off. Yeah. And I think what the NWA stands for this now is every time we run a pay-per-view, it's very, very good. Very, very solid, top to bottom. Our mid-card matches are just as important as our main events. There was a time where we'd have a couple kind of cool matches and some pretty good main events, and there was some other stuff where you're like, it could have been a TV match or not. Mm-hmm. We don't run those pay-per-views anymore. So don't sleep on us. That's what I keep telling people. Because if you want to be cool, you want to be there first, right? And so thank you for being there first, Steve.
Billy, listen, I am trying to be there first. I will be first in line when you come to Boston, just to let you know.
Thank you. There you go.
I'm going to make a shirt. Come on, Billy. Come on. But I really appreciate you sitting down with me today on NBC, because I'm pumped. You're pumped. We're all pumped for Hard Times. Of course, me and Billy stepped in some mud today. We'll see what happens after this.
Wait, let me stop you though. But wait, I want to challenge you, because this is wrestling.
Oh boy.
Why would you say we stepped in mud? What mud did we step in?
I have a feeling no matter what we say about Empower, there will be judgmental tweets, comments. They'll take what you said or what I said out of context. We might have said, 30 sentences. They'll take the two in here that fit their narrative and plop that into a headline, and suddenly what we said was the worst thing about women's wrestling. What we said was we love women's wrestling. We just want the quality to be there versus just having an event to have an event. So
I think that's the most, look, we live in a culture now where we talk about a lot of things that are super important: diversity, empowerment, equality. It is the most disrespectful thing in the world to treat any class of people, no matter how you want to separate people, and I don't like to separate people, but no matter how you want to separate, treat it as if they need a leg up, or they need like a helping hand. Mm-hmm. It's the opposite. The whole concept of empowerment is to create opportunity. Like, look, I'm going to give you this opportunity, and then you're going to kill it.
Yeah.
We're not here to cheat code anybody forward. Women, I've been saying it for 10 years. You can go back. I said it in Forbes over 10 years ago. I said in Forbes, the future of professional wrestling is women, because the business is too long sort of overlooked one of the biggest marketing aspects of what makes professional wrestling great. Okay. So I was Nostradamus over here about that. I called it early.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're bringing a lot of people to the table that traditionally have not been watching professional wrestling for the last 30 or so years. This is all great stuff. So people want to make controversy out of it. Deal. Right? Because at the end of the day, we're arguing about something that's great, not bad.
Yes.
It's not like we're over here burying and saying, oh, geez. It's like, no, this is awesome. It has to be awesome to keep making the case. Don't forget, if you're a fan, let's say you're a very casual fan and you wander into an event like Empower, if you don't walk out of there feeling inspired, well, then you haven't done your job to that fan, to make them want to come back, to want them to go out and buy that person's t-shirt. That's the responsibility of the business. This is not the 1950s where you could just throw anybody out there and make a spectacle. And the women traditionally back in the day were treated like spectacles.
True.
It wasn't taken seriously, is my point.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I agree.
Why do you think I bought the Mildred Burke belt? Because I own this talisman of what started as a movement, and what Mildred Burke went through: mocked, humiliated, treated like objectified, treated not like a serious professional athlete. And she went on to draw more than most of the men in the business, and then they were grumpy about it.
I wonder why they were grumpy about it. Money out of their pockets, most likely.
I'm a convert. You see what I'm saying? I'm there. I've been there. I put my money where my mouth is. So anybody wants to make hay out of that, that's fine. They can do that all day. But you try to run a world-class event, okay, again and again and again. That's what we're here to do. That's it. That's it. It's not any more complicated. You want to make it more complicated? Have at it.
We'll see if they make it more complicated.
I have a funny feeling somebody will somewhere.
I have a funny feeling you're right.
Okay.
But Billy Corgan, thank you so much for being here. I've been Steve Paul. He's been Billy Corgan. Hopefully we stay out of the mud together. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.